Hello, reed makers. This is Ariel with ACDC Reeds. I'm going to show you my forming process today while I drink coffee. Gotta have that coffee. Okay, so just going to give you a rundown of all the tools I have available with me today. I've got my little setup over here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I've got my handy dandy electric boiler. As you can see the steam coming out. I already have it boiled. I usually boil my water for like until it's boiling, obviously, and then let it sit for like 2-3 minutes until it's a little less in temperature. And then I put it into 2 different places. This is my cane soaking tin Starbucks cup. I usually keep the lid with it because the lid actually keeps the cane in the water instead of having like part of it protruding out. And then I have my bowl of water, which this is where I'm going to put the reeds when they're folded so that I don't have to like dump out the water to be able to find the reeds in this cup, basically. The water cools down in here really quickly. So usually I like to do like 4 reeds at a time and then replace the water because hot water is key to not getting cracks in your reeds. All right, next thing I have is pre-cut wire. I just cut all my wire ahead of time because it's easier and it takes less time in the long run when I'm trying to like do everything in the process. I use 0.6 gauge wire, like 23 gauge wire. It's 0.6 on the Rieger scale, so I just buy the spool of wire. And then I use string. This is to make sure that the reed doesn't crack, but I cut them all pre-cut and I just keep reusing them until they start looking nasty and then I replace them. It's basically basic twine from a craft store. And then I also have, just in case, I don't use these very often, but in case the tip is too thin and it opens up, you don't want that to dry that way. So I use little mini butterfly clips to close the tip of the reed if it opens, so that when it dries like every other reed, as if it were closed. We might not need those today. I just figured I'd let you know that that's what I keep handy when I'm making reeds. I also have my drying rack over here. It's a little dirty, but I have it. This one was custom made for me by my boyfriend's dad, who is an amateur woodworker. It's gorgeous, and I love it, and it holds 30 reeds. Woo! The other thing I want to have, if you aren't used to measuring, or if you aren't used to like eyeballing it, you want to measure your reeds, you're going to need a millimeter ruler and a pencil. Or a pen, doesn't matter. But usually when I started reed making, I would actually measure out all of my measurements and like mark them on the actual cane to make sure that I was getting exactly what I wanted. All right, and then this ruler actually is, you want a thin one because you're gonna actually fold the cane over on the ruler. So you want to make sure that it's a really thin, small ruler. These I got on Amazon actually because I lost my ruler for a short amount of time, my specialized one for reeds, and I can't find it today, ironically. So I'm gonna use a ruler that I got on Amazon. I bought 10 of these for like $5. So you can find really thin, small rulers for very cheap, which is awesome. And then I need my pliers. These are Rieger pliers. They have the hole in the middle so that they're like wire cutters as well as forming pliers. So like there's a hole in the middle here so that I can actually form into a perfect circle around the actual tube of the reed so that I end up getting a really good circle rather than like just using the mashing part of the pliers because that isn't as useful. It doesn't get as good of a result. Then I need a mandrel. This is a Rieger mandrel. As you can see, all of the wood has worn off from many years of use. But it has a line on it, which is really useful to show where the cane should go. I usually go a little past that, only because I tend to make my reeds too small and I end up having to ream them. And when they dry, they scrunch up, so I go just a little past. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. You can use a bunch of different kinds of mandrels. This one I found works the best only because I've tried, the fox mandrel is really cheap and like is only like this tall, and it definitely doesn't really do the trick. So, because it's too thick at the tip to actually like not crack the reed when you put it in the bottom of the reed. So, and then the forming mandrel that I have from Fox is like this long, and it actually, if you push it too far, it goes through the tip of the reed. So like technically you could use a forming mandrel just to get started and then switch to a regular mandrel. That's probably the best plan of action. I just use this because the hot water does so much to the reed to make it more flexible that I don't get a lot of cracks in my reed. So now, knock on wood, I probably will in this video. Just wait. All right, so I've got 2 pieces of cane soaking. I soaked them for probably 5 minutes in hot water. But you don't want it boiling because it could change the properties of the cane. So like you could do it boiling. It's not going to do too much. But my reeds end up lasting a long time because I'm not changing the cane too much with boiling. And so it basically, if you see the water change color because of your reeds in the water, that's not good. So you want it to be cool enough so that you can actually do stuff with it. So I also have a big light over here so you can see like my cane is profiled. Yeah, you can see like kind of the cane density through it, which is kind of nice. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my pieces of cane, leave the other one in the water, and I'm going to measure it. It should be, now this one sucks because it doesn't have like 150 on it. If you get a reed specific ruler, you'll see like 150 over here. 120. Sorry, 120. 150's contra. 120 should be perfect. And then we want to put a mark in the very middle of the cane. That's why I have my handy dandy pencil. And I'm going to do it on like 2 different sides of the cane. So I like usually do one higher up and then one lower, just to make sure I'm like folding it in the exact right place. Yeah. It's okay if it's not perfect because I'll show you a little trick to making it even later. So you're going to put your ruler under the cane and just fold it on that mark. Once it's folded, it'll just keep folding itself. Now, what you want to look at this point is not only your defined collars, if you've done that before, but also the end. So see, my ends are almost lined up. They might be a little off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end that is longer and put it on top. And then I'm going to put it on a flat surface. And very gently, I'm going to hold the cane underneath on this side. And then I'm going to push this. And sometimes I like to rock it back and forth very, very gently, like you're not even doing anything. Oh, so close, right? So close. Maybe just a little tiny bit more. This is a really cool trick, but you have to be careful with it because if it's more than like a millimeter difference on the bottom, you're going to have problems. So now both my collars and the ends are pretty much lined up. You can end up sanding like on the bottom just to make sure that you're getting that even, but it's just better to just have it line up initially. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to sand the edges because if you see, there's like little things hanging off here from when I shaped my cane. So I'm just gently, I'm not going to go up here and I'm not going to go down here. I'm just gently going to go right in the middle where my wire is going to be and kind of get that equally sanded. Nice and even so that there's nothing hanging off, nothing in the way. Because anything that's in the way of your wire could cause like a bubble effect. Like have you ever heard a piece of like a reed like bubble when you play it? It's like gurgling. Yeah, not good. That's usually because there's something in the way. So next I'm going to take my wire. These are 4 inches-ish. Depends on what you like. I like to do a little longer than normal. More is better because you can always take it away. You can't always add it. So what I do is I put it on top of the cane and make sure the edges are perfectly lined up. I don't do any overlay just because that's the way I like my reeds to look. Now I should say before I start this, I have already beveled my cane with the Wheat Beveler. So if you haven't seen this, this is super awesome. You literally take a dry piece of cane, put it in there, and then this is like sandpaper, and you just pull it, and it bevels the cane for you at an angle so that you actually like just get just the right amount of cane off instead of like pulling too much with a knife. If you have to, you can use like an X-Acto knife or something to go ahead on the edges, and that's after we start forming the reed. So I'll mention that in a minute. So for putting on the first wire, we're going to go right like 1 millimeter or 2 underneath the collar. I define my collars before I start making reeds because it's just easier that way, and it puts less pressure on the actual reed once it's made to define the collar before, like during the profiling process is basically when I do it. All right, so I'm going to adjust my wire to be 1 millimeter below the collar. And I'm going to twist it with my fingers first, just so that it stays. And then I'm going to twist it just a little bit with my pliers. Now this one needs to be a little bit loose because we're going to be forming it, and we need there to be a little bit of room for the reed to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Rieger pliers, and a really good way to measure with Rieger pliers, see there's this indented part of the plier, and then there's the flat side. I'm going to use the indented side towards the bassoon reed so that when I cut off a certain piece of wire, I'm not cutting anywhere too near the reed. So I get that perfect amount of wire. It's awesome. Perfect tool. All right. So now I'm going to wrap my reed in string. I start at the bottom, put it all the way up to the top just so that this will get covered by other string so that it stays. And then be really gentle up by the tip. I'm not going to go all the way up by the tip because there's no need for that. But then as I go lower, I'm going to tighten my grip because you want the pressure of the string on the reed to be able to keep your reed from cracking. If you think about it, pressure from all sides will keep the reed from coming apart more. And then with the excess string, I just go all the way back up. I usually measure my string to go down the reed and back up. So you have 2 layers of string. That's kind of what I'm going for. This one you can't really secure, so it's just going to be like a flag. And I'm going to put it in my hot water over here in this bowl. Now my hot water is already cooling down, like I can touch it and it's fine. So I'm going to add some more hot water to this to keep, because I've been talking a lot. I'm going to add a little bit more hot water to keep it up to temp. But at this point, if it was like lukewarm, I would be changing it because it's not hot enough to keep my reeds from cracking. So then I'll just do the same thing to the other one. But I'm not going to do that in this video because it'll be fine. You guys will get the point. Just one reed. All right, so now that it's been soaking, usually I do like 3 or 4 at a time, and they all soak, and I kind of do all the steps together, and then we move on. So I'm just going to like squeeze a little bit of the water out of the string. You can soak your string ahead of time too, if you want, but it doesn't really matter, honestly, as long as it gets wet eventually. All right, so now I'm going to take the reed, and I'm going to use my Rieger pliers with this hole. Now you see how the hole works. We're going to open it up just slightly. What I like to do is gentle pushes on the bottom half of the reed only. So see, I'm not going any farther than halfway up to the wire, okay? This is because I don't want cracks up here yet, and the reed isn't ready for that. So I'm going to stay down here, and I want it to be big enough for my mandrel to get in, but I don't want it to be too crazy big yet, okay? Because the mandrel will help us. So you can either hold it open to put the mandrel in. You can like do this kind of thing. Or you can just put the mandrel in. Usually holding it open is better, but I didn't do that. Okay. So now you can see the reed is kind of not flush against the mandrel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pushing the reed down onto the mandrel to get to this point of that line. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see in this lighting. I'm going to start pushing it down, and when I start to feel resistance, I'm going to go back and just turn the mandrel, keep the pliers in the same place, and I'm going to, again, do the bottom half of the reed only. Now, once I get almost to that line, which I'm almost there, it's right there, I'm going to go back up and just gently press that middle wire, the wire that I placed, just to create a little more opening so that wire opens up a little bit so that the reed doesn't crack up top. So again, I'm just going to mash all the way around the reed, this time a little firmer, and I'm not going to go any higher than the middle. All right, so now I'm going to go farther than the actual marking on the mandrel, because like I mentioned before, sometimes I end up having to ream my reeds a lot. And that's because I tighten the wire too much or I don't form it correctly. So try and get as far past the like 2 or 3 millimeters past the line on your mandrel, if you have one, is probably a good start. And then when it dries up, it'll shrink, and then it'll be at the line, which is perfect. And then you won't really have to ream much at all, just to kind of sand it out. All right, so now I'm going to leave the reed on there, and I'm going to unwrap it all the way, my little mummy. And usually, like, you know, to save time, I just wrap it around my hand like you would like a cable, and then just tie it back up, and I'll use it for more reeds later. Let it dry out with the collection of string over there. All right, so now you see that I've actually got some little cane pieces in the middle here. This is the point where I would usually bevel my reeds. But since I already used the Wee It bevel thing, I'm not going to actually do that. What I'm going to use instead, and my philosophy on beveling is that just take away what's excess. Don't take away anything that you need, because you can't put it back. So basically, if you see like a little thing like that, like a little cane piece that's just extra, go ahead and just like gently put the blade at an angle, the angle that the reed is made at, and take off just the excess. So you're not really creating an indent, because the point of beveling is to get the reed to come together flush. So now you see it looks pretty even. It's really bright, sorry. But it looks pretty even right now. So I think I'm good. This side, I'm just going to do the exact same thing. This is a really sharp knife, and I'm just realizing that. This is a like $5 Pittsburgh knife that I got from a hardware store. It was a set of 2. So one's bigger, one's smaller. I usually use the smaller one for things like this. They're really, really easy to use, and they can be used for a lot of different things. Hence the utility knife. All right, so I'm going to put that away. Now, as you can see, the line is not at the bottom of the reed. That's okay for now. So what I'm going to do, ooh, and I got a big crack, probably because my water wasn't hot enough. Sorry, reed. The thing about cracks is it's okay to have a crack in your reed as long as it doesn't go into this part. As long as it's not in the uncovered cane, you're fine. Don't worry about it. If it's up into this part of the reed, make sure that you're not using that, because it's going to cause problems. I mean, in the beginning stages of reed making, I would get cracks up here, and then I would play on it anyway, and it would be fine. But for a professional stage, I wouldn't play on that reed, or sell it. All right, so if you can see, my cross hatches here are about, let's measure it, from the collar. My cross hatches are about 8 to 9/10 down. So what I usually do is it's like almost a full centimeter actually from the tip, from the collar, right? So in between the first and second wire, if you're measuring from the middle of the wires, you should be like 7 millimeters. So if we're looking at that, it's like right here. So we're not in a bad state, right? That's pretty much where my cross-hatching is. So if you want to try that using your cross-hatching as a guide, that would be awesome. All right, so now I'm going to put on the second wire, and I'm going to put it at that 7 millimeter mark at the bottom of my cross-hatching, but I'm going to put it on the opposite way of the first wire. So put the edge, this wire down, and then you're going to do it the exact same way. Push it down with your thumb, push it across, and I'm going to go, I didn't explain this with the last wire, but I'm going to push the right end of the wire over the left. That's just the way I do it. Depends on what you like, but I'm a righty, so I just like to go away from me when I'm twisting the wire. So I'm going to twist the wire. Oh no, I did it wrong. Oh no, I didn't. Okay, so, sorry, I was distracted. Then we're going to push it one more time around. And we're going to go, keep the same one that was on the top before on the top on this side. It's hard to explain and do at the same time. I've never done that. Okay. So now we've got the second wire placed. Now, again, we're only going to tighten it very gently because I want to make sure that I can move this later. But this is the point where you're going to start to see the reed come together. Whenever you tighten your wires, pull first, then tighten. Otherwise, they get all like over each other and the wires end up cracking. All right, so we're going to cut that one. We're going to do our third wire. And same thing on the side that is like that. We're going to push it over, right end over, all the way around. And then this one, I like to tell people that I do like a 1/4 inch, a 1/4 inch, sorry. A 1/4 inch up from the bottom of the reed. So you see that? Perfect. The reason I do that is because the first and second wire need to be a certain amount apart from each other, but the bottom wire can be wherever you want it to be, really. If you go too close to the bottom and you wrap your reeds, you might end up going off the edge when you wrap your reeds. So because I like to do a pretty crosshatch pattern, I don't go too close to the bottom. So again, pull and twist. And now I'm going to go back over the middle of the reed. And I'm going to just press just a little bit between the second and the third wires all around. Kind of like evening out that crack in the middle by doing this. And then making the sides push together where I beveled them to get a really solid seal. And then I'm going to go underneath the third wire and do the exact same thing. Making sure that it's super, super round around the mandrel. Now notice I have not moved the reed since I formed it. All right, so another reason why you don't want to tighten your wires too much in this step is because you have to get the reed off the mandrel. So what we're going to do is we're going to go between the second and third wires and gently twist the mandrel out of the reed. If you did it right, it should come right off. Sometimes it's a little more difficult. Now I'm going to go just a little bit below the line on my mandrel and tighten those wires. Just a little bit. Again, what you want to see is the fact that they will not move and that they're flush against each other. See that? Like you don't have any gap between the wires. Up here we do. So we want to tighten that up so we don't have that. And you'll find that the top wire is the one that needs the most tightening because we left it the loosest and the reed moved between those steps. All right, so now we've got our 3 wires tightened. You don't want, the one thing to beware of is if you tighten it too much, you'll get that pinching effect. Where if you look at your reed and it's pinched, and like there's a clear like little pinch right here of the wood, then you've done something wrong. See how mine is really nice and angled? It's a really nice taper throughout the reed. That's kind of what you're looking for. All right, so now I'm gonna take that off the mandrel and I'm gonna put it on my drying rack. That is my forming process. I hope that you guys got some insight from this, and I hope that it was helpful. At this point, my water is like 80 degrees. So this is the point where I would replace my water for sure. And gotta finish my coffee. All right. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll have more coming about wrapping and all those kinds of things. Thank you. Happy reed making.